The brand still wept. Elena pressed her palm against the raw flesh of her inner wrist, feeling the raised edges of the Oathbreaker mark that had been seared into her skin 3 days ago. The iron had glowed white-hot in Alpha Roderick's grip, and she had smelled her own flesh burning before the pain registered, a sickly, sweet scent that still clung to her nightmares when exhaustion finally dragged her under. She kept walking. The forest path had disappeared 2 miles back, swallowed by undergrowth and shadow, but Elena didn't dare stop to find another route. Every hour she spent in the borderlands was another hour for Roderick's trackers to find her. Another hour for his mate, Serena, to send wolves to finish what the exile had started. Keep moving. For her. Keep moving. Her hand drifted to the swell of her belly, where her daughter, she knew somehow it was a daughter, had known from the moment the healer confirmed the pregnancy, stirred restlessly. 6 months along, and every step sent aching pressure through Elena's hips and lower back. Her ankles had swollen to twice their normal size. The threadbare cloak she'd stolen from the packhouse laundry did nothing to stop the autumn chill from seeping into her bones. But she kept walking, because stopping meant dying. The memory surged up unbidden. Serena's face twisted with triumph as she stood before the pack assembly, her voice dripping with manufactured grief. She seduced my brother, crawled into his bed while his wife lay dying in the healer's wing, and when Marcus rejected her advances, she threatened to cry assault unless he gave her what she wanted. Lies. Every word, poison-soaked lies. Marcus Ashford had cornered Elena in the grain cellar. He had pressed her against the stone wall with his body weight while his hand covered her mouth. He had whispered that no one would believe in Omega over the Alpha's own brother, and when Elena's wolf had surged up in desperate defense, raking claws across his face, Marcus had screamed. Serena found them. Serena saw the blood on Elena's hands and the scratches on her mate's brother's cheek, and Serena made a choice. The choice to protect her family's honor. The choice to destroy Elena completely. Oathbreaker, Roderick had pronounced, his voice echoing through the great hall, while 200 wolves watched Elena kneel on the cold stone floor. Seductress, liar, you are cast out from the Silver Ridge Pack. Your name is struck from our records. Your wolf is dead to us. And then the brand. And then the gates slamming shut behind her. And then 3 days of walking through territory where any wolf who found her could claim her body as salvage and her child as property, because Oathbreakers had no rights. Oathbreakers were less than rogues. Oathbreakers were prey. Elena stumbled over a root and caught herself against a birch tree, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Her vision swam. When had she last eaten? There had been berries yesterday. She thought it was yesterday. And stream water that tasted of copper and rotting leaves. Not enough. Not nearly enough for a pregnant wolf pushing her body past its limits. The Shadow Court. Get to the Shadow Court. The thought had crystallized somewhere in the haze of her second night alone, when she'd huddled in a hollow log and listened to hunting howls echo through the darkness. King Nikolai Shadowfang ruled the largest territory in the northern realms, and his court was rumored to be different. Ruthless, yes. Powerful beyond measure, but also just. Also willing to hear petitions from wolves who had nowhere else to turn, and Elena had something to offer. Before her disgrace, before Marcus's assault, she had served as a scribe in Silver Ridge's council hall. She had copied documents and filed correspondence and been so thoroughly ignored that no one noticed when she lingered in doorways during meetings that were supposed to be private. She had overheard Serena's father, Lord Vance, speaking with a hooded messenger about border movements, about the Shadowfang problem, about how a new alliance with 3 southern packs would finally give them the numbers to challenge the king's territorial claims. Conspiracy, treason, war. Elena had evidence burned into her memory, and she was desperate enough to trade it for sanctuary. The trees began to thin. Elena's heart lurched as she caught the first glimpse of cultivated land, fields lying fallow for winter, their neat furrows stretching toward a cluster of buildings in the middle distance. And beyond that, rising against the gray sky like a declaration of power carved in stone, the towers of Shadowfang Keep. She had made it. Elena's legs buckled. She caught herself on her hands and knees in the frost-hardened dirt, gasping, and for a moment she let herself feel everything she'd been holding back. The terror, the exhaustion, the grief of losing the only pack she'd ever known, even though they had never truly wanted her. The fury at the injustice of it all, branded for the crime of defending herself, cast out for the sin of being vulnerable. Get up. You have to get up. Her daughter kicked, a sharp flutter against Elena's ribs. I know, Elena whispered, pressing her hand to her belly. I know, little one. We're almost there. She forced herself upright. One step, another. The road appeared beneath her feet, packed earth leading toward the keep's main gates. Elena's wolf stirred weakly, pressing against her skin in warning as she scented other wolves nearby. Guards, probably, patrolling the border. Let them come. Let them drag her before their king in chains if they wanted. She had nothing left to lose except the child growing inside her, and she would burn the world to ashes before she let anyone take that. The patrol found her a quarter-mile from the gates. 4 wolves in human form, wearing the black and silver livery of the Shadow Court, materialized from the tree line with weapons drawn. Their leader, a hard-faced woman with a scar bisecting her left eyebrow, took one look at Elena's swollen belly, her branded wrist, her mud-caked clothes and hollow cheeks, and her expression flickered with something that might have been pity. "Halt!" the woman commanded. "State your name and purpose." Elena straightened her spine. She thought of Serena's smirk as the brand sizzled against her flesh. She thought of Marcus's whisper in the cellar. No one will believe you. She thought of her daughter, fighting to survive inside a body that was slowly failing. "My name is Elena Ashford," she said, and her voice came out stronger than she expected. "I am oath-branded by Silver Ridge Pack. I carry information about a conspiracy against your king, and I demand an audience with Alpha Nikolai Shadowfang." The patrol leader's eyebrows rose. "You demand," she repeated. "I demand." Elena held the woman's gaze without flinching. "What I know could prevent a war. Take me to your king, or tell him later that you turned away the one person who could have warned him. Your choice." Silence stretched between them. Elena's heart hammered against her ribs, and her wolf coiled tight with tension, but she didn't let her exhaustion show. Couldn't afford to. Weakness was death out here, and she had already died once when that brand touched her skin. She refused to die again. The patrol leader studied her for a long moment. The brand, the belly, the steel in Elena's eyes, and then jerked her head toward the gates. "Search her, then bring her to the keep." A pause. "The king will want to see this one himself." Elena allowed herself one shaky breath of relief as rough hands patted down her cloak and found nothing but desperation. The gates of Shadowfang Keep loomed ahead, dark stone and darker promises. She had no idea what awaited her inside. But whatever it was, she would face it standing. The keep swallowed her whole. Elena's first impression was of shadow, not the darkness of threat, but something older, something that seemed to breathe in the spaces between torchlight. The corridors stretched endlessly, black stone walls absorbing the flickering flames while the patrol's footsteps echoed against floors worn smooth by centuries of passage. She counted her breaths to stay upright, each exhale burning in her lungs as her body screamed for rest she couldn't afford. The hard-faced patrol leader walked ahead, her scarred brow occasionally turning to check that Elena still followed. The other 3 guards flanked her, close enough to catch her if she fell, but not touching. Elena was grateful for the small mercy. Every brush of contact since the cellar made her skin crawl with remembered violation. They climbed stairs. More stairs. Elena's swollen ankles protested each step, her calves cramping with the effort of hauling her pregnant body upward. The baby shifted restlessly, pressing against her bladder, and Elena gritted her teeth against the discomfort. She would not ask to stop. Would not show weakness here, in the heart of a power she didn't yet understand. Finally, the patrol leader halted before a set of massive oak doors, their surfaces carved with wolves, running through a forest of thorns. She knocked twice, sharp, decisive raps, and waited. Enter. The voice that came through the wood was deep, resonant with an authority that made Elena's wolf lift her head for the first time in days. Not a command, exactly. Something more fundamental than that. Something that pulled at her bones. The doors swung open. Elena stepped into a study that defied her expectations. She had imagined something cold and formal, a throne room perhaps, or a receiving hall designed to intimidate. Instead, she found herself surrounded by books. Shelves climbed every wall, crammed with leather-bound volumes and loose sheaves of parchment. A fire crackled in a massive hearth, casting warmth across worn rugs and comfortable chairs. Maps covered a long table near the windows, their edges weighted with stones and half-empty cups of tea. And behind a desk of ancient oak, papers scattered across its surface, stood Alpha King Nikolai Shadowfang. Elena had heard descriptions of the Shadow King. Ruthless, they said. Cold as the northern winters. A wolf who had carved his kingdom from the corpses of his enemies and ruled it with an iron claw. No one had mentioned that he was young, not young like a pup, but younger than she'd imagined for a wolf who commanded such power. Perhaps 30 winters, perhaps fewer. His dark hair was pulled back from a face of sharp angles and shadows, cheekbones like blade edges, a jaw that spoke of stubborn determination. He wore simple clothing, black wool and gray leather, nothing like the finery she'd expected of royalty. There was ink on his fingers. Ink, as though he'd been writing his own correspondence rather than dictating to scribes. But none of that mattered. None of it mattered. Because the moment Elena's eyes met his, warmth flooded her chest like molten honey spreading through her veins. The sensation was immediate, overwhelming, utterly unlike anything she had ever experienced. Heat bloomed behind her ribs and radiated outward, down her arms, up her throat, pooling low in her belly where her daughter stirred in sudden recognition. Elena's skin prickled with awareness, every nerve ending suddenly alive to the charged air between them. Her wolf, her poor, battered wolf who had been so quiet since the branding, surged against her skin with a ferocity that stole Elena's breath. Him, her wolf whispered. Him. Ours. Mate. No. No, that was impossible. Elena stood frozen, her rehearsed speech crumbling to ash on her tongue as King Nikolai's expression shifted. She watched his sharp inhale cut through the silence, saw his pupils dilate as gold bled into dark irises. His hands moved to grip the edge of his oak desk, and she heard the wood crack beneath his fingers. Actually crack, splinters forming under the pressure of his grip. "Leave us," he said. His voice had changed. Rougher now, scraped raw by something Elena recognized because she felt it too. The mate bond pulling at them both, demanding acknowledgement. The patrol leader hesitated. "Your Majesty, leave us." No one argued with that tone. Elena heard the doors close behind her, sealing her in this fire-lit room with a king whose eyes had gone molten gold and whose chest was rising and falling with barely controlled breaths. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Neither of them spoke. Elena's heart hammered so hard she thought it might bruise her ribs from the inside. Her wolf paced frantically, desperate to close the distance between them, to press her nose against this male's throat and breathe him in. "He's a king," Elena's rational mind screamed. You're a branded oathbreaker carrying another wolf's child. This isn't. You can't. Your name. Nikolai's voice was carefully controlled now, each word measured. His gold-rimmed eyes hadn't left her face. I would hear it from your own lips. Elena swallowed. Elena Ashford, formerly of Silver Ridge Pack. A muscle ticked in his jaw. You bear their brand. Yes. She raised her chin, refusing to hide her shame. I was cast out for a crime I did not commit. I defended myself against assault, and my attacker's family rewrote the story to destroy me. Something dangerous flickered across the king's features, a rage so vast Elena felt it press against her like a physical force. His wolf was close to the surface, she realized, close enough that she could almost see it looking out through those golden eyes. Who? The word was barely human. It doesn't matter. Elena forced herself to stay steady. What matters is the information I carry. Your borders are threatened. 3 southern packs are forming an alliance with Silver Ridge, and they mean to challenge your territorial claims. I overheard their plans. Every detail, every name, every timeline. I came to trade that knowledge for sanctuary. Nikolai said nothing. He was still staring at her with that intensity that made her skin burn, still gripping his desk like a man holding himself back from something he desperately wanted. Her wolf wanted to go to him, wanted to press against his chest and let him wrap his arms around them both. Wanted, with an ache that terrified her, to belong to this stranger. You feel it, he said finally. It wasn't a question. Elena's throat tightened. I feel something I cannot afford. I am pregnant, Your Majesty. 6 months along with a child who is not. Her voice cracked. I am branded. Broken. Whatever this is, it cannot. Cannot what? He stepped around the desk, and Elena's entire body went rigid with warring instincts. Fear and want tangled in her chest until she couldn't tell where one ended and the other began. Cannot exist. I assure you, Elena of Silver Ridge, what pulses between us now is more real than any brand burned into your skin. He stopped an arm's length away. This close, she could smell him. Pine and leather and something darker, like thunderstorms rolling across mountains. Her wolf whined, straining toward that scent. I expected many things today, Nikolai said quietly. His eyes had faded from gold to something between amber and smoke, but they still burned. Petitions, border disputes, tedious negotiations with tedious lords. I did not expect to have my mate walk through my door wearing another pack's cruelty on her wrist and another wolf's child beneath her heart. The word mate hit her like a physical blow. Elena swayed and Nikolai's hand shot out, then stopped, hovering a breath from her elbow. May I steady you? The question shattered something in Elena's chest. After weeks of violation and accusation and rough handling, after Marcus's hands on her skin and the guards who had searched her, after the patrol who had touched her without asking, this king, this alpha, this wolf who could command her body with a single growl, was asking permission. Yes, she whispered. His fingers closed gently around her elbow. Warmth flooded through the contact, and Elena's knees nearly buckled. She heard Nikolai's sharp exhale, felt his grip tighten incrementally before he deliberately loosened it. You need food, he said, his voice rough. Rest, a healer. I need answers. Elena looked up at him, close enough now to see the darker flecks in his amber irises. What happens to me now? What happens to my daughter? Something flickered across his face, a tenderness so unexpected it stole her breath. Now you eat. You sleep. Tomorrow, when you are strong enough, you will tell me everything you know about Silver Ridge's conspiracy. He paused. And I will tell you everything you wish to know about what burns between us. And if I don't want it? The question came out smaller than she intended. This bond, if I can't, Nikolai released her elbow and stepped back, putting space between them. Elena felt the loss like a wound. Then you don't want it. His voice was steady, but she saw the cost of those words in the tension of his shoulders. You are not a prisoner here, Elena. You came seeking sanctuary, and you will have it, regardless of what exists between our wolves. I will not touch you without your consent. I will not claim what you do not freely offer. His jaw tightened. You will never be touched without your consent in my court. Not by anyone, not even by me. The vow rang through the room, and Elena felt her wolf settle slightly, not calm, but less frantic, less afraid. Why? She asked. You're a king. An alpha. You could. I could. He cut her off, something fierce flashing in his eyes. And I won't. Because whatever Silver Ridge taught you about what alphas take, I am not that wolf. He moved to the door and pulled it open, revealing the corridor beyond. My guard captain will escort you to chambers near my own. There is a female guard stationed there. Mira. She has orders to ensure your safety and attend to your needs. Elena hesitated. Near your own chambers? Won't that cause talk? A ghost of a smile crossed his severe features. Everything causes talk. Let them whisper. He met her eyes, and she saw his wolf looking back at her, patient and hungry and heartbreakingly gentle. Rest, Elena. Eat. We will speak again when you are strong. She walked past him on trembling legs, acutely aware of his presence even as she crossed the threshold. In the corridor, the scarred patrol leader waited with a stoic expression, and Elena followed her through a maze of passages until they reached a door of dark wood. The chambers beyond were larger than her entire quarters at Silver Ridge. A fire burned in the hearth. A massive bed dominated the space, and through an open door, Elena glimpsed a copper bathing tub filled with steaming water. Mira will bring food shortly. The patrol leader paused at the door. The king's chambers are through that connecting door. It locks from your side only. Elena blinked. From my side? His orders. The woman's scarred brow lifted slightly. Whatever you are to him, you're not a prisoner. Remember that. The door closed and Elena was alone. She stood in the center of the room, her body aching and her mind reeling, and pressed her hand to her chest where the warmth of the mate bond still pulsed. A king. She had been claimed by some cosmic joke and bound to a king. Her daughter kicked, as if in agreement. I know, Elena whispered. I don't understand it either. She limped to the bathing chamber, stripped away her ruined clothes, and lowered herself into water that smelled of lavender and healing herbs. The heat seeped into her battered muscles, and for the first time in 3 days, Elena wept. Not from grief, not from pain, from something stranger, something that felt almost like hope. The food came, as promised, carried by a young female guard with kind eyes who introduced herself as Mira. Elena ate more than she had in days. Thick stew, fresh bread, sliced apples with honey. Her stomach protested at first, then settled as proper nutrition finally reached her starving body. Dressed in a clean shift that someone had left folded on the bed, Elena slept. She dreamed of golden eyes and thunderstorm scents, and a voice that asked permission before touching. When she woke, sunlight was streaming through tall windows, and the warmth in her chest had not faded. If anything, it had grown stronger overnight. A steady pulse that seemed to orient itself toward the connecting door Nikolai slept behind. Her wolf stirred, pressing toward that connection, and Elena sighed. What have we gotten ourselves into? A knock interrupted her spiraling thoughts. Mira entered with fresh clothing, a simple blue gown that would accommodate her belly, soft leather slippers for her swollen feet, and news. The king requests your presence at the evening meal. Mira's tone was carefully neutral. In the great hall, if you feel strong enough. Elena's throat tightened. The great hall, with the entire court watching. Am I to be put on display? Mira's expression softened. You are to be fed. But the king thought you should know. There has already been talk. Lady Lyra Windrider has made her displeasure known. Who is Lady Lyra Windrider? A noblewoman who has spent 3 years positioning herself as the king's future queen. Mira's voice was carefully flat. She is not pleased by your presence in chambers near his. Elena closed her eyes. Of course. Of course there would be rivals and politics and jealousy. She had fled one nest of vipers only to land in another. But something in her had changed since yesterday. Some part of her that had curled up and died when the brand touched her skin had started breathing again, warmed by a mate bond she hadn't asked for, and a king who asked permission to steady her elbow. I will attend, Elena said. Tell your king I accept his invitation. The great hall blazed with candlelight and court finery, a sea of faces turning toward Elena as she entered on legs that still trembled slightly. She wore the blue gown Mira had provided, her hair brushed and braided, her branded wrist hidden beneath a long sleeve. Nikolai sat at the head of a massive table, his dark clothing a sharp contrast to the jewels and silk surrounding him. When his eyes found Elena across the crowded room, gold flickered in their depths, and she felt the mate bond pulse with something that might have been relief. He was waiting for me. The thought warmed her even as anxiety clawed at her chest. She walked toward the empty seat that had been placed at his right hand, a position of honor that set whispers rippling through the assembly. She was 3 steps from her chair when a voice cut through the murmur like a blade. Is this the borderland broodmare we've been housing? Lady Lyra Windrider rose from her seat halfway down the table, her elaborate silver gown catching the candlelight. She was beautiful in a cold, carved way, with hair like moonlight and eyes that glittered with malice. Tell me, Your Majesty, do we now offer sanctuary to every oath-branded whore who wanders to our gates? The silence that fell was absolute. Elena froze, heat flooding her cheeks, as 200 eyes fixed on her branded wrist hidden beneath blue silk. She expected Nikolai to say something measured, political, kingly. Instead, he rose from his throne. The movement was slow, deliberate, and utterly terrifying. Power radiated from him in waves that pressed against Elena's skin, against the skin of every wolf in the hall. Several courtiers physically flinched back, and Lyra's face went pale beneath her perfect cosmetics. Kneel. One word. A command that resonated with Alpha authority so profound, it seemed to vibrate the air itself. Lyra's legs buckled without her permission, her elaborate gown pooling around her as she crashed to the stone floor. Elena Ashford is here as my personal guest. Nikolai's voice carried to every corner of the hall. She is under the protection of the crown. Any insult to her is an insult to me. Any harm done to her is harm done to me. His gold-rimmed eyes swept the assembled court like a blade seeking throats. Have I made myself clear? Murmurs of assent rippled through the room. I asked you a question, Lady Windrider. Nikolai's attention returned to the kneeling woman. Have I made myself clear? Lyra's jaw worked, fury warring with fear on her beautiful face. Yes, Your Majesty. Then you will apologize. Elena watched Lyra's hands clench in the fabric of her gown. Watched the noble wolf's pride shatter against the immovable force of her king's command. I apologize, Lyra gritted out, for my words. Look at her when you say it. Lyra's head turned, her eyes meeting Elena's with pure hatred. I apologize, Lady Elena, for my words. You may rise. Lyra stood on shaking legs and returned to her seat, her face a mask of humiliation. Nikolai turned to Elena and extended his hand. Come, sit, eat. She took his hand. His fingers closed around hers, warm and steady, and the mate bond sang between their palms. Elena walked the final steps to her seat and lowered herself into it, acutely aware of every eye still fixed on her. But the whispers had changed. No longer mocking, wondering now, calculating. These wolves had just watched their king bring a noblewoman to her knees for insulting an oath-branded stranger. None of them understood why. None of them knew about the bond that pulsed between Elena and their king, or the conspiracy she carried knowledge of, or the danger already gathering in Lyra's malice-filled eyes. But Elena knew. She felt it in the warmth of Nikolai's hand before he released hers. Felt it in the way he positioned himself between her and the hostile stares of his court. Felt it in the mate bond that hummed beneath her skin like a promise she hadn't yet agreed to keep. Whatever this was, whatever it became, she was no longer alone. And for the first time since the brand touched her skin, Elena let herself believe she might survive. The feast stretched on for hours, each course more elaborate than the last. Elena ate mechanically, barely tasting the roasted venison or honeyed root vegetables placed before her, too aware of the currents swirling beneath the surface of polite conversation. Lyra Windrider had retreated to her seat, but Elena could feel the weight of her stare like a knife pressed between her shoulder blades. When the final course was cleared and the musicians began their evening entertainment, Elena excused herself with a murmured word to Nikolai. His eyes searched her face for a long moment before he nodded, and she felt his reluctance to let her go through the bond that now seemed to pulse constantly between them. Mira fell into step beside her as she left the great hall, the guard's presence a comfort Elena hadn't expected to need. The corridors were quieter now, most of the court lingering over wine and gossip, but shadows pooled in corners and alcoves that seemed to watch her pass. "You handled yourself well in there," Mira said quietly. "Not many could sit through that with their head high." "I've had practice," Elena replied, one hand resting on her belly where her daughter had begun to stir. Being stared at. Whispered about. She didn't add that the whispers here felt different, calculating rather than contemptuous. These wolves were weighing her, trying to determine what value an oath-branded Omega could possibly hold for their king. They rounded a corner, and Elena nearly collided with a figure emerging from a side passage. Lady Lyra stepped back, her silver gown traded for something darker, more practical. Her face was composed now, all trace of earlier humiliation carefully smoothed away. "Lady Elena," the title dripped with mockery. "I wanted to apologize again. Privately." Mira's hand moved to her sword hilt. "The Lady Elena is returning to her chambers. I won't keep her long." Lyra's smile was beautiful and utterly empty. "I simply wanted to explain that I meant no true offense earlier. Court can be overwhelming for those unaccustomed to it. I'm sure you understand." Elena studied the other woman's face, reading the hatred that simmered beneath her pleasant expression. "Of course. No offense taken." "I'm so glad." Lyra's gaze dropped to Elena's belly, and something flickered in her eyes, something cold and calculating. "You must be exhausted, carrying such a burden, and without a mate to support you. The father, he abandoned you?" The question was a blade disguised as sympathy. Elena felt her wolf bristle, pressing against her skin in warning. "The circumstances of my pregnancy are not court gossip." No, of course not." Lyra tilted her head, moonlight hair cascading over one shoulder. "It's just that I've spent 3 years learning the ways of this court. Learning what the king values, what he needs in a queen, and I can't quite understand what he sees in—" Her eyes swept Elena's travel-worn figure, lingering on the brand hidden beneath silk. "Well, perhaps it's simply kindness. His Majesty does have a soft heart beneath all that darkness." "Perhaps." Elena held her voice steady. "Or perhaps he sees something you don't." Lyra's composure cracked, just for an instant. Rage blazed in her eyes before she smoothed it away. "Perhaps. We shall see, won't we? Court is full of dangers for those who don't know how to navigate it. I would hate to see you stumble." She swept past, her shoulder brushing Elena's as she went. The contact sent a chill racing down Elena's spine. Not fear, exactly, but warning. Her wolf growled low in her chest, recognizing a threat. "That one bears watching," Mira muttered as Lyra disappeared around the corner. "She's had her claws in the king's court for years. Thought she'd be wearing a crown by spring." Elena nodded slowly, her mind working through implications. Lyra had positioned herself as the inevitable queen, and now an oath-branded Omega had appeared, drawing the king's attention and protection. The humiliation in the Great Hall would have been unbearable for someone so invested in her own elevation. Dangerous, Elena thought. Lyra Windrider was very, very dangerous. The days that followed settled into a strange rhythm. Elena woke each morning in chambers that still felt borrowed, ate meals delivered by servants who watched her with curious eyes, and spent her afternoons in the keep's library researching the conspiracy she'd overheard. And every evening Nikolai came to her. He never touched her, never pressed beyond the boundaries she'd silently established. He simply sat in the chair across from her fire and asked about her day, her research, her health. Sometimes he brought documents for her to review: border reports, alliance treaties, intelligence from the southern territories. He valued her mind, she realized slowly, valued her observations and insights. "Lord Vance mentioned 3 southern pacts," she told him one evening, 6 days after her arrival. "But the alliance feels bigger than that." The messenger spoke of northern sympathizers. Nikolai leaned forward, firelight catching the angles of his face. "Northern sympathizers within my own court?" "Possibly." The words were vague, but she hesitated, then pushed forward. "Lyra Windrider. Her family holds lands near the southern border, don't they?" Something shifted in his expression. "They do. And she's been positioning herself as your future queen for 3 years. You've been paying attention." Elena met his gaze directly. "I've been branded a traitor once for crimes I didn't commit. I know what it looks like when someone builds a case against you." Lyra isn't just angry about losing her position, she's planning something. Nikolai was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was rough. "I've known Lyra since we were children. Her father served mine. I've watched her transform from an ambitious girl into a wolf who wants power badly enough to destroy anyone who threatens it." His jaw tightened. Yes. The admission hung between them. Elena understood what it cost him to acknowledge that someone he'd trusted, someone woven into the fabric of his court, might be conspiring against him. "The child," she said quietly. "My daughter. In court politics, an Omega mate with another wolf's child is a vulnerability." He finished her thought, and something fierce blazed in his eyes. One that Lyra could exploit. She could claim the child threatens the succession, that my judgment is compromised, that you're too weak to lead. Nikolai rose abruptly, pacing to the window. His shoulders were rigid, tension radiating from every line of his body. Elena watched him struggle with something, some internal battle she could only glimpse through the bond. "I should send you away," he said finally, "for your own safety, for the child's safety. If Lyra is truly plotting—" "No." The word escaped before she could stop it. Elena stood, one hand braced on the arm of her chair for balance. Her daughter stirred in her belly, and the mate bond pulsed with sudden heat. "I spent 3 days walking through hostile territory because I had nowhere else to go. I stood before your court and watched a noblewoman try to destroy me with words. I've been branded, cast out, and nearly broken." Her voice shook, but she didn't look away. "I will not run again." Nikolai turned. Gold bled into his dark eyes as he looked at her. Really looked, seeing past the branded wrist and swollen belly to the wolf beneath. "You're the most stubborn woman I've ever met." "Is that a compliment?" A ghost of a smile crossed his lips. "It might be." He crossed the room slowly, giving her time to retreat. She didn't. When he stopped before her, close enough that his warmth pressed against her skin, Elena felt the mate bond surge between them like a living thing. "I want to protect you," he said quietly. "Both of you. Not because you're weak. You're anything but. Because you're mine. You've been mine since you walked into my study 3 weeks ago and demanded that I listen." Her breath caught. "Nikolai, I know you're afraid. I know you have every reason to be. But I need you to understand something." He raised one hand, hovering near her cheek without quite touching. "Whatever happens with Lyra, whatever conspiracy is brewing in the borderlands, you are not alone anymore. You will never be alone again." She should have stepped back, should have maintained the careful distance she'd built between them. Instead, she leaned forward, just slightly, and his palm curved against her jaw like it had always belonged there. "The brand," she whispered. "Everyone sees it and thinks they know what I am. I know what you are." His thumb traced her cheekbone. A woman who fought when fighting seemed hopeless, a mother protecting her child, a wolf brave enough to walk into the shadow court and demand an audience with a king. A knock at the door shattered the moment. Nikolai stepped back, his expression hardening as Mira's voice came through the wood. "Your Majesty, Lady Elena, you need to come to the Great Hall. Now." The urgency in her tone sent ice down Elena's spine. Nikolai was already moving, pulling open the door. "What's happened?" "Accusations." Mira's face was pale. "Lady Lyra has called a formal assembly. She's claiming she has proof that Elena used dark magic to seduce you, that the pregnancy is cursed, that—" Elena's knees nearly buckled. "Dark magic. Cursed." The words echoed the accusations from Silver Ridge, the lies that had cost her everything. "When?" Nikolai's voice could have frozen fire. "Now, Your Majesty. She's addressing the full court." They moved through the corridors like wolves racing against time. Elena's heart pounded against her ribs, her daughter kicking frantically as if sensing her mother's fear. The mate bond pulled her toward Nikolai even as terror tried to root her feet in place. The Great Hall was packed when they arrived. Every wolf of significance had been summoned, gathered in a sea of silks and furs and watching eyes. At the center of it all stood Lyra Windrider, radiant in white and gold, her voice carrying through the vaulted space. An Omega branded for seduction, a woman cast out by her own pack for crimes against her Alpha's family. And now, she has bewitched our king. Nikolai strode through the crowd, wolves parting before him like water. But before he could speak, Lyra raised something in her hand, a vial of dark liquid that seemed to writhe with its own inner light. "I found this in her chambers, moonsbane mixed with binding herbs, the same mixture our ancestors used to force false mate bonds." Gasps rippled through the assembly. Elena's blood ran cold. She'd never seen that vial before, never touched the moonsbane that apparently damned her. "It's a lie," she said, but her voice was drowned by the rising murmur of the crowd. "Is it?" Lyra's smile was triumphant. "Or have you finally been exposed for what you are, a witch who ensnared our king with dark magic?" Nikolai's power surged through the room, silencing every voice. But when Elena looked at his face, she saw something that terrified her more than Lyra's accusations. Doubt. Just a flicker, quickly buried. But enough to tell her the truth. Unless she found a way to prove her innocence, Lyra's poison had already begun to work. The Great Hall held its breath. Elena felt the weight of every stare pressing against her skin. Judgment, curiosity, and something darker lurking beneath the polished facades of Nikolai's court. Lyra stood like a pillar of righteous fury, the vial of moonsbane catching torchlight as she held it aloft, and the crowd's murmurs built into a tide of suspicion that threatened to drown Elena where she stood. "Well?" Lyra's voice rang clear and triumphant. "Does our king have nothing to say? Or has her magic stolen his voice as well as his reason? Nikolai's power still pressed against the room, but Elena could feel the fracture in it, the hairline crack that Lyra's accusation had opened. He believed in her. She knew that in her bones. But belief wasn't proof, and proof was what the court demanded. Think. There has to be a way. Her mind raced through everything she knew about pack law, about the ancient traditions that governed wolves. Silver Ridge had used those laws to destroy her, twisting truth until it became unrecognizable. But the Shadow Court was older, its customs reaching back to the first wolves who had walked these lands. The Truth Circle. The memory surfaced like a bubble breaking through dark water. Her grandmother had spoken of it once, in hushed tones, a rite so ancient that most packs had forgotten it existed. A ritual where a wolf could bear their memories to assembled witnesses, proving innocence or guilt beyond any doubt. It required complete vulnerability. Every memory, every shame, every secret laid bare before watching eyes. It would mean showing them Marcus's hands on her body, showing them Serena's triumphant smile as the brand seared her flesh, showing them every humiliation, every terror, every moment of weakness she had fought so hard to bury. Elena's stomach churned. Her daughter kicked sharply, as if sensing her mother's fear. But the alternative was worse. The alternative was watching Lyra's poison spread, watching Nikolai's court turn against him for loving her, watching everything they might build together crumble to ash. I demand a truth circle. Her voice cut through the murmurs like a blade. Silence crashed over the hall, so complete that Elena could hear her own heartbeat thundering in her ears. Lyra's composure cracked, just for an instant. A what? You heard me. Elena stepped forward, her chin lifted despite the trembling in her limbs. You accuse me of dark magic and seduction. I accuse you of conspiracy and attempted murder. Let the truth circle reveal which of us speaks honestly. Whispers erupted through the crowd. Elena caught fragments. Hasn't been called in a century. The old ways. She'd have to show everything. You can't be serious? Lyra's laugh was brittle. The truth circle is a relic. No one even remembers the proper rituals. I do. The voice came from the back of the hall. Wolves parted to reveal an ancient woman, bent with age but moving with unmistakable authority. Her silver hair hung in a braid past her waist, and her eyes, pale as winter ice, fixed on Elena with unsettling intensity. Elder Moira, Nikolai said, and even his voice held a note of surprise. You haven't attended court in 15 years, since your father died. The old woman's gaze swept the assembly. But some things are worth leaving my tower for. The truth circle is sacred law. Any wolf may invoke it to prove their innocence. The accuser must also submit to it, or withdraw their claims. Every eye turned to Lyra. Elena watched the calculation flicker across the noblewoman's face. Withdrawing meant admitting defeat, but submitting meant revealing every dark thought, every secret scheme, every moment of treachery to a room full of witnesses. Fine. Lyra's smile returned, sharp as glass. Let the Omega bear her shame. Let them all see what she truly is. The preparations took less than an hour. Elder Moira directed servants to clear the center of the great hall, creating a circle of bare stone floor ringed by torches. Ancient symbols were chalked onto the flagstones, protective wards, the old woman explained, to contain the power of the ritual and ensure no participant could lie. Elena stood at the circle's edge, her heart racing. Nikolai had tried to talk her out of it twice, his worry bleeding through the mate bond like heat from a banked fire. You don't have to do this, he'd said, low enough that only she could hear. I can simply execute Lyra without proof? Exile her on the word of an oath-branded Omega? Elena had shaken her head. Your court would fracture. Half would believe I'd bewitched you. The conspiracy in the borderlands would gain sympathizers and everything you've built. I don't care about any of that. His eyes had blazed gold. I care about you, about what this will cost you. She had reached up then and touched his face the way he had touched hers earlier. Then trust me. Trust that I'm strong enough to bear it. Now she stepped into the circle and Lyra stepped in across from her. Elder Moira began to chant in the old tongue, her voice rising and falling in patterns that made Elena's wolf stir uneasily. The torches flickered. The air grew thick. Open your memories, Moira commanded. Let the truth be seen. Pain lanced through Elena's skull, and then she was back in the grain cellar. Marcus's body pressed her against the stone. His breath was hot against her ear, his whispered threats burrowing into her brain like poison. No one will believe you. You're nothing. Just an omega. Just pray. She felt it all again, the terror, the helplessness, the desperate surge of her wolf as claws extended and raked across his face. She heard her own scream mixing with his, felt the blood on her hands, tasted bile rising in her throat. The memory shifted. Serena before the assembly, her lies flowing like honey. She seduced my brother. The crowd's gasps, their judgment. Alpha Roderick's cold pronouncement. The brand, white-hot against her wrist. Elena screamed as the remembered agony tore through her, but she didn't let the circle break. She held it, held herself open, let them see everything. The 3 days walking through hostile territory, the hunger, the fear, the desperate hope that drove her toward Shadowfang Keep. The moment she first saw Nikolai and felt the mate bond blaze to life in her chest. Every tender word he'd spoken, every moment of unexpected kindness, the way he valued her mind and respected her boundaries. No dark magic, no moonsbane, no seduction. Just a broken woman finding unexpected grace. Elder Moira's voice cut through the memories. Now the accuser. Lyra tried to resist. Elena felt it through the ritual's connection, the noblewoman fighting against the circle's pull, trying to bury her secrets deeper. But the ancient magic was relentless. The hall gasped as Lyra's memories spilled forth. 3 years of scheming, of positioning, of eliminating rivals through whispers and manipulation. Letters exchanged with Lord Vance in Silver Ridge, coordinating the conspiracy Elena had overheard. All plans within plans, the alliance with the Southern Pax was just the beginning. Once Lyra became queen, Nikolai would meet with an unfortunate accident. And Elena was supposed to have died days ago. The vision shifted to show Lyra's hands crushing moonsbane into Elena's evening meal. A different preparation than the vial she'd planted, this one designed to trigger early labor, to force the child into the world before she could survive. Lyra had watched through a spy hole as servants carried the poisoned food toward Elena's chambers. Only Nikolai's unexpected visit had saved her. He'd sent the food away, insisting they dine together in his study instead. "You were supposed to die," Lyra snarled, and Elena realized the noblewoman was speaking aloud now, her control shattered by the circle's power. "You and that bastard child. You ruined everything, walking in here with your brand and your belly and your pathetic story. He was supposed to be mine. He was never yours." Elena's voice came out steady, though her whole body shook with exhaustion. He was never anyone's to own. The truth circle blazed white, then dissolved. Both women staggered, released from its grip. Silence rang through the hall. Nikolai moved first. He crossed to Elena's side, his hand finding hers, and when he turned to face Lyra, his expression could have frozen the sun. "You poisoned my mate." Each word fell like a stone into still water. "You conspired with enemies to destroy my kingdom. You planned my assassination." Lyra's face had gone the color of old bone. "Nikolai, Your Majesty, I can explain." "You cannot." He raised his voice, letting it roll through the hall. "Lyra Windrider, you are sentenced to exile beyond the veil. Your pack bonds will be severed. Your name will be struck from all records. From this moment until your last breath, you are packless, nameless, and alone. No. Lyra's shriek tore through the air. No, you can't. I am a Wind Rider. My family has served the crown for generations. She's nobody. An Omega whore carrying a bastard. I was supposed to be queen. You were supposed to be loyal. Nikolai's hand tightened around Elena's. Take her. Guards moved forward. Elder Moira began a different chant, one that built in power until the air itself seemed to vibrate. Elena felt it when the severing happened, a psychic snap that made Lyra scream as every pack bond she'd ever formed was torn away. The guards dragged her toward the doors. She fought them every step, howling, cursing, making promises and threats that grew increasingly desperate. But the wolves of the Shadow Court watched in silence, their faces carved from stone. The doors slammed shut behind her. Elena's knees buckled. Nikolai caught her before she could fall, lifting her into his arms despite her protests. You need rest. The healer should examine you. I'm fine. But even as she said it, a sharp cramp seized her belly. She gasped, clutching at his shoulder. Elena? Another cramp, stronger this time, radiating through her lower back. The baby, she whispered. Something's wrong, the poison. Oh gods. Nikolai, the baby. The next hours blurred together in a haze of pain and fear. The healers said the Moonsbane had been working its way through her system for days, building slowly toward crisis. The Truth Circle's strain had accelerated its effects. Elena's daughter was coming 3 weeks early, and there was nothing anyone could do to stop it. She labored through the night, Nikolai refusing to leave her side despite the healer's protests. When the pain grew unbearable, she gripped his hand hard enough to bruise, and he let her, murmuring encouragements she could barely hear over her own screaming. Dawn was painting the windows gold when her daughter finally arrived. She's breathing, the chief healer announced, and Elena sobbed with relief as a thin, angry wail filled the room. Small, but strong, like her mother. They placed the baby on Elena's chest. She was tiny, so impossibly tiny, with a dusting of dark hair and perfect miniature features. Her eyes were squeezed shut, her mouth open in protest at the indignity of being born, and Elena had never loved anything so fiercely in her entire life. "Hello, little one," she whispered. "I promised I'd keep you safe. I promised." Nikolai leaned close, his eyes suspiciously bright. "She's beautiful. She's ours." The words escaped before Elena could think better of them. She looked up at him, suddenly uncertain. "I mean, she's ours." He said it like a vow. "If you'll let me." The healers withdrew, murmuring about rest and recovery. Elena barely noticed them leave. She was too focused on the weight of her daughter against her heart and the wolf who stood beside her bed, waiting. "The Truth Circle showed them everything," she said quietly. "They saw what Marcus did, what Serena did, every humiliation, They saw a woman who survived what would have broken anyone else." Nikolai sat on the edge of the bed, careful not to jostle her. "They saw strength, Elena. The kind that makes kingdoms." She shook her head. "I'm still branded. Still, you're mine." The words held the weight of mountains. "My mate. My queen, if you'll have the title. And no brand, no past, no whispered rumor will ever change that." The baby made a small sound, settling deeper against Elena's skin. Through the mate bond, she felt Nikolai's hope, bright and vulnerable beneath all his kingly composure. "Ask me properly," she said. His lips quirked. "Elena Ashford, will you let me claim you? Will you claim me in return? Will you stand beside me as Luna Queen of the Shadow Court? From this night until our last?" "Yes." The word came out steady, certain. "Yes to all of it." He leaned forward slowly, giving her time to change her mind. His lips brushed her forehead first, then her cheek, then the corner of her mouth. Gentle, questioning. Elena shifted, and his mouth found hers. The kiss was soft, reverent, nothing like the hungry desperation she might have expected. He kissed her like she was precious, like she was worth savoring, and when he finally pulled back, his eyes had gone fully gold. "The baby should sleep," she murmured. "There's a cradle." Nikolai took their daughter with exquisite care, settling her in the carved wooden cradle beside Elena's bed. The infant fussed for a moment, then stilled, her breathing evening into the rhythm of deep sleep. When he returned to Elena's side, the air between them had changed, thickened. "We don't have to do this now," he said, though his voice was rough with barely contained need. "You've been through... I've been through enough waiting." She reached for him, and he came willingly, settling beside her on the bed. "I want this. I want you. No more delays." He exhaled shakily. "Tell me if anything hurts. If you need me to stop..." "Nikolai." She cupped his face in her hands, making him look at her. "Stop talking." The first touch of his lips to her throat made her gasp. He traced a path down her neck, following the line where her pulse hammered beneath her skin, and each press of his mouth sent warmth flooding through her veins. The mate bond pulsed between them, growing stronger with every point of contact. When he reached the junction of her neck and shoulder, he paused. "Here," he breathed against her skin. "This is where I'll mark you. This is where everyone will see that you belong to me, and I to you. Do it." His teeth pressed against her flesh. Not biting, not yet. Testing, asking one final time. Elena tilted her head, baring her throat completely. He bit down. The pain was sharp and bright, a starburst of sensation that made her cry out. But almost immediately it transformed, heat flooding outward from the wound, cascading through her body like liquid fire. The mate bond blazed open, wider than she'd ever felt it, and suddenly she could sense everything Nikolai felt. His fierce protectiveness, his desperate hope, his love. God's, the depth of his love, vast as an ocean and just as overwhelming. He had been alone for so long, carrying the weight of a kingdom on his shoulders, and she was home to him. She was peace and challenge and joy and everything he hadn't dared to want. Tears streamed down her cheeks as his teeth finally released. "Elena." Her name on his lips was a prayer. "My mate. Mine." "Not yet." She pulled him close, feeling the thundering of his heart against her chest. "Not until I mark you back." His breath caught. "You don't have to." "I want to." She pressed her lips to his jaw, his throat, the strong column of his neck. "I want everyone to know you're mine too." She found the spot that called to her, the junction of his neck and shoulder, mirroring where he'd claimed her. Her wolf surged forward eagerly as she opened her mouth and bit. The taste of him flooded her senses, pine and wood smoke and something wild. He groaned as her teeth broke skin, and through the bond she felt his pleasure, his relief, his joy at being claimed as thoroughly as he'd claimed her. "Yours," he whispered through the bond. "Always yours?" "Mine," she answered. "Mine, mate." When she released him, they were both trembling. The bond between them had settled into something new, not the desperate pull of before, but a golden warmth that wrapped around her heart and promised it would never let go. Nikolai gathered her close, careful of her still healing body. Elena pressed her face against his chest, listening to his heartbeat, feeling the throb of their matching marks. "Mates," he murmured into her hair. "Mates," she agreed. Finally. They stayed like that until the baby stirred again, demanding attention with the imperious wail of all newborns. Nikolai retrieved their daughter while Elena struggled to sit up, and soon the three of them were tangled together. Elena nursing while Nikolai watched with undisguised wonder. She needs a name, he said eventually. Elena stroked her daughter's cheek. Aurora, for the dawn, because she brought light into my darkest night. Aurora Shadowfang. Nikolai tested the name, then smiled. Crown Princess Aurora Shadowfang if the council has no objections. They won't dare. Elena's voice was tart, but her eyes were soft. Not after what they saw in the Truth Circle. The coronation took place 3 weeks later. Elena stood in the great hall where she had once been accused of witchcraft, wearing a gown of midnight blue embroidered with silver wolves. The Oathbreaker brand still marked her wrist. She had refused the healer's offer to try removing it. I earned this scar, she had told Nikolai. It reminds me what I survived. Now Elder Moira placed a crown of twisted silver on Elena's head while the assembled wolves watched in silence. Aurora slept peacefully in a nurse's arms nearby, blissfully unaware of the history being made. I present to you Elena Shadowfang, Moira announced, Luna Queen of the Shadow Court. Long may she reign. The hall erupted in cheers. Later, after the feasting and the well-wishes, and the endless parade of nobles vowing their loyalty, Elena slipped away to the palace balcony. Dawn was breaking over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold. Arms wrapped around her from behind. Escaping your own coronation party? Nikolai's voice was warm with amusement. Just needed air. She leaned back against his chest, feeling the settled contentment of the mate bond humming between them. It's a lot to take in. A month ago, I was sleeping in a hollow log and eating berries. Now I'm a queen. Now you're exactly where you were always meant to be. He pressed a kiss to her hair. With me. With our daughter. Home. Home. The word wrapped around Elena's heart like a blessing. She had never truly had one before, not in Silver Ridge, where she had always been tolerated rather than welcomed. But here, in Nikolai's arms, with their daughter sleeping peacefully inside and an entire kingdom spreading out before them, she finally understood what the word meant. The border situation? She asked, because she couldn't entirely turn off the part of her brain that tracked threats and conspiracies. Lord Vance has been arrested. The Southern Pacts are suing for peace now that their conspiracy is exposed. Nikolai's arms tightened around her. It's over, Elena. You saved us all. She shook her head. We saved each other. The sun crested the mountains, spilling golden light across the balcony. Elena turned in her mate's arms, pulling him down for a kiss that tasted of hope and healing and all the years stretching out before them. Below, the Shadow Court stirred to life. Wolves moved through the courtyard, going about their morning routines, unaware that their Luna Queen stood above them, finally at peace. Inside the palace, Aurora began to fuss, her thin wail carrying through the open doors. Elena smiled against Nikolai's lips. Our daughter calls, she murmured. Our daughter, he repeated, wonder still coloring his voice after 3 weeks of fatherhood. I never imagined. Neither did I. She took his hand, twining their fingers together. But here we are. They walked back into the palace together, the mate bond singing between them, the dawn light following at their heels. Aurora's cries softened as they approached, the infant already sensing her parents' presence through bonds that transcended blood. Elena had walked into the Shadow Court with nothing but desperation and a dangerous secret. She had found a mate, a crown, and a family. She had found home.